Hey guys, it's Sai back here. Welcome back to my podcast. Today I'm going to be telling you about the fourth book in the Harry Potter series, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. So, Harry this year was going to be starting his fourth year at Hogwarts. And after everything he's been through in his first 3 years, he was really excited because he would finally get to escape the Dursleys for almost a whole year and get to be with his best friends Ron and Hermione for a whole year too. This story starts in a dream, Harry's dream, and the dream starts in Little Hangleton. Basically, the villagers of Little Hangleton were pretty scared of the Riddle house. Why? Because the family who lived there, which was the Riddle family, hence the name the Riddle house, were murdered, but there was something different about the murderer. The thing was that he was never found, and also there were no cuts or anything. There was no difference except for the fact that they were well dead. So, this story is where we get to meet Frank Bryce. Frank Bryce was the gardener of the Riddles, and he was the most suspected of, the murder. Of course, though, he got let go and he today lives in a shed near the Riddle house. So basically, he was just reading his paper with a fire and drinking some coffee. But then something happened. Wait, before I tell you what happened, let's rewind a little bit to what happened earlier when the Riddle family was killed. Basically, no one knew who the murderer was, and police identified the bodies as Tom Riddle and his two parents. Very surprising, because they were a very wealthy family with no reason, no enemies. So who would want to kill them? Now, let's fast forward back to Frank, because this is where we see who actually killed the Riddles. And trust me, to you it might not be so surprising, but to the Muggles it sure was. Well, if they ever found out about it, that is. Frank heard a really loud bang noise in a nearby cottage. Oh, blimey, those must be the kids, he said. I'll go sort them out, because Frank was not a person who liked to deal with kids. He thought that they were really, really annoying and didn't like them on the Riddles / now his property. So he walked over to the little shed on the other side of the street and walked in. Don't these kids know better than to be awake at this late at night? He walked in and he dropped his cup of coffee. I don't know why he would bring it in there, but he sure dropped it. Because what he saw was terrifying. Now, don't worry, it wasn't something that you'd normally be scared of, but it was really, really weird, which made it really terrifying. It was two men, one who looked like he'd been living as a rat for 12 years, because he was. Yeah, that was Ron's rat Scabbers, who we found out in the third book was actually Peter Pettigrew, the person who we could blame for Voldemort finding Harry's parents and murdering them. And the other man was, in case you didn't know, Barty Crouch Jr. Now, we won't go more into him because, spoiler alert, he's a really important character in this book. I've already said too much. But there weren't only those two men. There was also the person who had killed the Riddles years ago. That person was Tom Marvolo Riddle himself. Now, we all know that in the second book, we found out that Tom Marvolo Riddle changed his name to something wizards and witches would once fear. And he made his name, Tom Marvolo Riddle, into an anagram which spelled, I am Lord Voldemort. Yeah, Voldemort was the one who killed the Riddles. Why? Well, we'll come into that later or maybe in the next few books because it's also kind of important for the storyline / plot. But there was something different about Voldemort. He was weak. As we all know, once again, in the first book, we found out that when Voldemort killed Harry's parents, Lily and James Potter, he then pointed his wand at a baby 1-year-old Harry, ready to kill him as well. But since Harry's mother, Lily, sacrificed herself, her love acted as a force field on Harry, and the killing curse rebounded on Voldemort and took his body, I guess. But we all know that in the first and second book, we saw Voldemort, just not Voldemort. Like, not the Voldemort that he used to be, not the one that he was when he killed Lily and James. This was his third state of Voldemort. The first was when he was on the back of Quirrell's head. The second was as Tom Riddle, Riddle, a teenage cute boy. And the third was this, what Frank and Harry were seeing in Harry's dream and whatever Frank was seeing. And I guess Peter and Barty Crouch Jr. as well. This Voldemort was like a deformed baby monster. Yeah, that's what terrified Frank so much. And I guess Peter, as he looked like a rat, literally. So he dropped his glass, and when Voldemort noticed that he was there, a snake came out. Yeah, that's pretty terrifying too. A snake. Now, you probably didn't know this, but Voldemort has a pet snake, Nagini. And no, it's not the type of pet snake you could have which aren't venomous. This one's actually poisonous and could kill you. So the snake slithered out, but don't worry, it didn't kill Frank. It just slithered by its feet, biting kind of, not biting, snapping, I guess you could say. That's what snakes do. So it slithered back to Voldemort's chair, which is where he was laying, and in a raspy voice, he said, "Kill him, Wormtail." Now, you also probably know this from the third book because of the Marauders map. The makers of the Marauders map were Padfoot, Prongs, Moony, and Wormtail. So they were the makers of the map, and the only maker of the map here was Pettigrew, who obviously betrayed all of his friends. Terrible, terrible Pettigrew. So his nickname now to Voldemort and pretty much the rest of the world was Wormtail. So Wormtail took out his wand and yelled the killing curse, which was Avada Kedavra, and now everyone who used to live in the Riddle family was dead. So, here we answer our first mystery kind of. Avada Kedavra was the killing curse, and it basically just kills you. So that's why the Riddle families had no scratches or knife marks anywhere, because that's how they were killed, with the killing curse, which of course Voldemort / Tom Riddle had used on them. Harry wakes up in a jolt of fear. Now, here's the weird thing. Harry always has weird dreams and all, and he literally met Voldemort twice. So that of course didn't scare him. But the weird thing was, his scar was hurting. Yeah, in his first book, his scar was also hurting, and his second, just not in his third, because Voldemort wasn't around. That's the answer. Voldemort wasn't around. In his first book, Voldemort was on the back of his DA teacher's head. So that explains the scar hurting. And in his second book, or second year, Voldemort was standing about 5 feet away from him, just in his teenage boy form. So that also explains why his scar was hurting. But why was it hurting now? Wait, it couldn't mean... No, Voldemort wasn't around right now, was he? No, he wasn't. But still, it was pretty creepy. I mean, the last 2 times his scar hurt, the person who tried to kill him was right there. He either knew it or didn't, but he was there. But Voldemort wasn't in Privet Drive, so why was Harry's scar hurting? Could it be because of the dream? Well, maybe, but we'll solve that mystery later. Harry, of course, didn't know that Voldemort wasn't around and was really scared about it. Because if he was, what about the Dursleys? I mean, they're not going to do anything to protect him, would they? So he thought of writing to his best friends, Ron and Hermione. They would always support him in anything, but sometimes their replies could get a little weird. He thought of what his best friend Hermione would say if he wrote to him that his scars was hurting. It would be a little something like this. Are you sure your scar's hurting? Well, I'm no expert, but I'd say that you send a letter to Professor Dumbledore because he would know this sort of stuff. Harry, this is really worrying because the last time your scar hurt, blah, 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 blah. So he let that idea go and thought about writing to his other best friend, Ron. Then he thought of what Ron would say. Your scar's hurting? Well, you know what happened the last time your scar was hurting. But I don't think that's why, because Voldemort couldn't be at your house, could he? I think that I could ask my dad about scars, but he does work about Muggle stuff because he works in the Department of Muggle Misuse, which is basically like he finds out what Muggle stuff can do. And then Ron would go on and on and on and on about other stuff. He let go of that idea too because Hermione would be too worried and Ron would be a little too less worried. Then he thought about his godfather, who last year he really despised, but in the end of his last year, he thought that he was the only good family that Harry had left. So he thought of writing to him, because he knew that Sirius Black, mass murderer, who wasn't really a murderer, but was innocent and was his godfather, would always know exactly what to say to cheer Harry up and would always have a simple explanation to his problems, like the fact that his scar was hurting. So he took out his quill and parchment, which you might be wondering how he had, because the Dursleys last year, they took everything off of him the second he got back from his second year. So how did he have all his magical stuff in his room? Well, the answer itself is the person he's writing to. Once Harry got back from his third year at Hogwarts, he told the Dursleys about his mass murderer godfather, Sirius Black. But he very conveniently forgot about the fact to tell them that he's innocent and is his godfather. A very good one indeed as well. So that kind of let them keep all his stuff, and that's how he had the quill and parchment in his room. So he started writing, and he kind of forgot to write about the scar. But I have a feeling that he kind of wanted to forget because he didn't think it would be such a big deal. So he rolled his piece of parchment up and gave it to Hedwig, who flew off to wherever Black was. Now, the reason Harry didn't know where Black was because he didn't tell him. He thought it would be best to, stay away from the rest of the world and only talk to Harry through letters so that he wouldn't be too away from him either. So Hedwig flew off and Harry went down the stairs to the kitchen where Aunt Petunia was making breakfast. She was chopping one single grape. That's right, one grape into 4 quarters for her, Uncle Vernon, Dudley and Harry. That won't be a lot of nutrients, Aunt Petunia. But the reason she was doing this was because of Dudley's latest report card. Now, the thing about the report card was, it said a lot of stuff about him not being too focused, but they brushed that off. Then it also said about stuff about bullying, but they got an excuse like he needs his exercise and brushed that off too. But then at the end of the report card, it said that he really needs to eat a little less and supposedly needs to go on a diet, because that also could be brushed off, but Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon weren't smart enough to find out a way to do that because they were way too lazy. Then They started having a diet with Dudley, and Harry also had to follow because, well, Dudley wouldn't like it if he was the only one who had to do the diet, and his parents would of course do it with him. So she cut a quarter of the grape and gave one to Harry and one to Dudley. She gave a bigger one to Dudley so that Dudley would at least have the nice thought of thinking, oh wow, I got more than Harry, that's great, and he would gobble it right up. Harry, of course, didn't care about the diet because just last month it was his birthday, and of course the Dursleys like always forgot about it. Luckily, his friends Ron and Hermione didn't, and neither did the gamekeeper Hagrid, who also became a really good friend of Harry's because on his birthday 3 years ago, when he became 11, Hagrid showed Harry the magical world, which took him away from all the torture living with the Dursleys. Anyways, all three of them had sent Harry 3 large cakes for his birthday. And he would always, whenever he didn't get to eat much, go upstairs and eat a little bit of his cakes by himself in his room. Gods, if Dudley knew about those cakes, he would have already eaten them up. And his birthday was just last month. Harry's, not Dudley's. Anyways, aside from the fact that Harry wasn't following the diet, it looked like Dudley wasn't either. Because just yesterday, he saw him smuggle some non-diet food from the fridge. Some other food that Harry had gotten from his friends were a large box stuffed of sugar-free snacks from Hermione because Hermione's parents were dentists, so that would make sense. And of course, Hagrid the gamekeeper had also given him a sack full of his own homemade rock cakes. Harry didn't even touch those because he knew that Hagrid's cooking wasn't the best, especially his rock cakes. But Mrs. Weasley, who was Ron's mother, had sent a lot of food, like enormous fruitcakes and assorted meat pies. But she also made the mistake of sending Errol, who was a very elderly and feeble owl. He literally needed 5 whole days to recover from that long journey from the Weasleys to Harry. And of course, the Dursleys had ignored that. And another thing the Dursleys had ignored was Harry's birthday, which is when he got all these 4 superb cakes. Did I say 4? Yeah, that's right. He also got one from his godfather, Sirius Black. Now, he already had 2 left, so he was looking forward to a real breakfast upstairs when, all this grapefruit drama was over. So, he went upstairs, and then downstairs he heard that the doorbell had rang. As quick as a flash, Uncle Vernon went and answered the doorbell. It was mail. And we all know how the first time that we heard Harry got the mail had ended with a letter from magical people. Of course, it was a letter that he was accepted at Hogwarts. Now this wasn't very different either. Uncle Vernon called Harry to the living room and he, of course, went. And this, once again, like the first time we heard Harry got mail, was a letter from magical people. It read, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Dursley, we have never been introduced, but I am sure you have heard a great deal from Harry about my son Ron. As Harry might have told you, the final of the Quidditch World Cup takes place this Monday night, and my husband Arthur has just managed to get prime tickets through his connections at the Department of Magical Games and Sports. I do hope you will allow us to take Harry to the match, as this is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Britain hasn't hosted the Cup for 30 years, and tickets are extremely hard to come by. We would of course be glad to have Harry stay for the remainder of the summer holidays and see him safely onto the train back at school. It would be best for Harry to send us your answer as quickly as possible in the normal way, because the Muggle postman has never delivered to our house, and I am not sure he even knows where it is. Hoping to see Harry soon. Yours sincerely, Molly Weasley. P.S. I do hope we've put enough stamps on. Now that P.S. is what made Uncle Vernon really mad. Because, of course, Mr. and Mrs. Weasley have no idea about Muggle Post, which is why they said, I hope you can send a reply quickly the normal way, which is their normal way, Owl Post. So, since they had never used Muggle Post before, they had literally covered every inch of the envelope with stamps. Literally every inch except a tiny corner which had the signature of... No, not the signature. The address of Privet Drive. Look at this, growled Uncle Vernon, showing Harry the envelope, and Harry really tried not to laugh. Because even reading that, I had to fight down a laugh. So, other people would not have made such a big fuss about too many stamps, especially if they knew that their nephew was a wizard and this came from their kind, as Uncle Vernon would say. And they'd even think that it's pretty funny. But, of course, Harry had lived with the Dursleys long enough to know that anything, even slightly out of the ordinary, would be a topic to make a really big fuss on. Now, Uncle Vernon then asked the question, what do they mean by the normal way? And then Harry said that by the normal way, they mean the way that we use to send letters to others, Owl Post. Uncle Vernon seemed really mad because he didn't like any out of the ordinary things in his house. And I'm pretty sure you guys have never written a letter to someone and used an owl to send it to them. So, of course, Uncle Vernon didn't like it when stuff that magical people use or have even heard of are said in his house. So, he really got mad. And Harry asked, so can I go? Because he thought that the Dursleys would love Harry to be away for a whole year. And they love it when he goes to Hogwarts, which is a boarding school. That would mean that they could get Harry out of the house a few days before than he's supposed to. So, it would really help them. Who is this woman? He said, staring at the signature with this gate. Of course, Uncle Vernon said that. Harry said that he had seen her and she's Ron, my friend's mother. She was meeting him off at the school train at the end of last term, remember? So, he almost said Hogwarts Express, and like I said earlier, any talk about magic is forbidden in the Dursleys' house. So, Mr. Dursley looked really unpleasant and said, dumpy sort of woman, like loads of children with red hair. Harry didn't like that. Calling someone dumpy in the Dursleys' house is an understatement, because they themselves have a son who is the exact definition of dumpy. So, he nodded with gritted teeth, and Uncle Vernon finally said, oh fine, you can go and watch this Quidditch World Cup with them, whatever that is. Harry almost said that's our sport, but he decided to keep it down. Then Uncle Vernon also said, and yes, you can spend the summer with them. So that was really, really great. But then Uncle Vernon asked the question which Harry forced himself not to answer. What's Quidditch anyways? What's this rubbish? Harry said, it's our sport. Played on brooms. And the second he said brooms, Uncle Vernon lost it. Oh, I said you can go, okay? Now just stop with this letter nonsense. And he threw the letter at Harry. Thank God he didn't burn it like he did with all the Hogwarts letters. Once Harry had got to his room, he noticed that Errol was face down on his bed. Now, Errol is the Weasleys' really clumsy elf. And I already talked a little about him earlier, so I won't dive so deep in it. But we first met Errol in Chamber of Secrets. So you might know about him from there too. Errol had a letter in his beak. Harry took the letter out and read, Harry, Dad got the tickets. Ireland versus Bulgaria, Monday night. Mum's writing to the Muggles to ask you to stay. They might already have the letter. I don't know how fast Muggle post is. Thought I'd send this with Pig anyway. Pig. That was kind of weird. Then there was another letter which said, we're coming for you whether the Muggles like it or not. You can't miss the World Cup. Only Mum and Dad reckon it's best if we pretend to ask for their permission first. If they say yes, send Pig with your answer pronto and we'll come and get you at 5 o'clock on Sunday. If they say no, send Pig back pronto and we'll come and get you at 5 o'clock on Sunday anyways. Hermione is arriving this afternoon. Percy started work the Department of International Magical Cooperation. Don't mention anything about a board while you're here unless you want the pants bored off you. See you soon, Ron. So basically, everything you understand on this letter is pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to explain it too much. Harry wrote on a piece of parchment with his quill that he could come and sent Errol back to the Weasleys with it. So he was now really excited to go to the Quidditch World Cup because if you don't know, Harry is practically a pro Quidditch player. He literally joined the Quidditch team when he was 11. No one has ever done that. And to me, he has the most important job on the team, a seeker. Because if the seeker catches one tiny walnut-sized ball, the whole game ends and they win. Of course, that's only how Hogwarts plays Quidditch, but the rules are pretty similar at the Quidditch World Cup as well. It's just that if you catch the snitch, it just adds 150 points, which it also does in normal Quidditch at Hogwarts. It's just that you need 150 points to win. But in the Quidditch World Cup, it's basically like you have to get as many points as you can, and whoever has the most wins, like at the end, whoever has the most wins. So yeah, pretty simple Quidditch. But of course, he couldn't sit there and explain Uncle Dursley about Quidditch while his face got redder and redder and redder. So, the next day, they all got ready and yeah, they were like, Uncle Vernon was wearing his finest suit while Dudley was just wearing a t-shirt and shorts. That's a great first impression, I'd say. But they didn't want to make a great first impression. That's not the reason Mr. Dursley was wearing a nice fancy suit. The only reason he was doing that was to show them that they're richer, more powerful, and a lot better muggles than they could ever be. So, then it became 5 o'clock. And then 5:30. And then 5:45 and 6. Are they ever going to be here? Said Uncle Vernon, obviously furious. They'll come, said Harry. Uncle Vernon asked Harry if they were going to take a car, but Harry knew that they probably weren't because, well, the Ford Anglia, which Harry and Ron basically drove into a tree which would destroy everything it hit, was destroyed by the tree which would destroy everything it would hit, which was called the Whomping Willow, which was also the entrance to the Shrieking Shack in the third book, which led to a lot of other stuff. So that tree did a lot. It also broke Harry's broomstick, well, his old broomstick, which was a Nimbus 2000, and I'm talking about the Whomping Willow a little too much. So, Harry kind of said yes, because he thought that maybe Mr. Weasley just got a different Ford Anglia, which was also enchanted by him to fly. But that wouldn't explain why they were late, because if they were driving in a flying car, they would be here earlier than 5. So they were pretty confused why they still weren't here. Even Harry didn't know how they were going to come. Neither of Ron's letters had explained anything. Then a boom, crackle happened in the living room. Of course, before that, Mr. Dursley had went into the living room to check the time, and he was in it when that boom crackle sound happened. Aunt Petunia, Dudley, and Harry ran into the living room. Well, of course, Harry didn't run in for Mr. Dursley because he just remembered another way that the Weasleys could get to the Dursleys. And that way was Floo powder, which was introduced to us in the second book, Chamber of Secrets. And the only problem was that the Floo powder happened in the fireplace. And the Dursleys had an electric fire, which is why they had blocked the normal fireplace, which is kind of where Santa comes down from. So I don't see why they would block it if they still celebrate Christmas. Oh, I'm going off topic. Harry could hear Mr. Weasley, Fred, George, and Ron there, and they were making a lot of noise. "Someone's foot's on mine." "Really?" said Fred. "Because someone's foot is on my head." "Something's wrong. Why aren't we already out?" "And Ron, when did you get here?" And there was a lot of fighting because they couldn't get out of the fireplace. Then Mr. Weasley said, "What's wrong? Did we get into the wrong house?" "Excuse me, hello?" he said without even thinking if they were in the wrong house. Like, imagine if a muggle was there who didn't know about magic and he was just like, "Oh yeah, we're wizards and blah, 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 blah." Luckily, they weren't in the wrong place, and it was just that the Dursleys had blocked their fireplace off so that no one could, so that they could use an electric fire. Harry told that to Mr. Weasley, and since he does a muggle job where he tries to find out all things muggle, like rubber ducks and bathtubs, he asked, "Really? Do those have plugs in them?" "I've been collecting plugs, Mr. Dursley," knowing that he would be standing there. And then a lot of stuff happened. But luckily, Mr. Weasley found a way to apparate all of the kids out. And Dudley was acting very stupid and rubbing his bottom because the last time he'd seen wizards, well, he had a pig's tail. So that's not very great, is it? He was walking around really scared while Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia were like, their jaw was touching the ground almost. They were really in shock and mostly probably scared. Then a lot of stuff happened and Mr. Weasley introduced himself and the kids that he had brought with him. Then more stuff happened. Like the fact that Fred and George dropped a toffee which made anyone's tongue grow 5 feet tall. And of course, Dudley, being the non-diet follower he is, ate it and his tongue grew 5 feet tall. Yeah, he should have known no one's gonna go at his pigtail again, shouldn't he? Then he had a giant tongue. Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon ran to him, screaming in terror. And he told Mr. Weasley or Arthur Weasley told his kids to go through the Floo powder. Harry was really worried to go because the last time that happened, he ended up in Knockton Alley. If Hagrid wasn't there, he wouldn't be here to this day. Yeah, if you know what I mean. So then, Harry stayed for a while until everyone else was gone. And everyone said the burrow. So Harry figured that's what he would say because he'd been there before in his second year and his third. No, wait, not his third. He was at Diagon Alley in his third. But he did meet the Weasleys. So he stepped into the fireplace, but Mr. Weasley and the Dursleys were really putting on a really funny show there. Like, Dudley's tongue was 5 feet tall. Aunt Petunia was crying over him, and Mr. Weasley had his wand out trying to fix it. "Look, I can fix it," he said. "Trust me, it's just one of my kids' jokes. It'll wear off if you just let me do a spell." Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon obviously didn't let him do anything. "Harry, just go," yelled Arthur, and Harry dropped the Floo powder in his hand and yelled the burrow. Luckily, this time, he didn't get diverted and actually ended up in the burrow. Great news for him. So this is where Harry's journey in the Dursleys ends. And he was finally at the burrow. So they had dinner and chatted a lot, and Harry had also met Ron's other two siblings, Bill and Charlie. Charlie was the dragon expert who had taken Norbert from Hagrid in the first book, and Bill was the guy who worked at Gringotts as some spell thing. Bill was really smart, but the thing about him was he used to be a head boy and Percy was a prefect, which didn't go well because Percy was like a only rule following scum. But Bill, on the other hand, wasn't anything like that. He, as Harry thought, was actually cool. Yeah, cool. He was nothing like the Percy he knew. Well, Percy Weasley he knew. And yeah, he had long hair, Bill. He had long hair which was tied in a ponytail and even earrings. They set the table and ate dinner. And some people were talking about Quidditch, some people were talking about muggles, and some people were talking about Bill's earrings. The earrings conversation was between Molly and Bill, who was Ron's mother. So then they all went to sleep, and the next day, everyone was pretty excited. And a lot of stuff happened. For starters, they were going to walk, not to the Quidditch World Cup, just to a potki, which you'll get to know about more later. And for another thing, Fred and George were going to be sneaking the tongue toffees that they had given Dudley. Luckily, Molly found them and took them out of their pockets, which were literally dripping toffee. So they all got ready, and of course, Mrs. Weasley wasn't going to come. For starters, she wasn't a really big fan of Quidditch, and they didn't have enough tickets. And someone needed to get their school supplies if they were going to stay there for more than one day. Because Quidditch games can actually happen longer than you think. So everyone got ready and started walking to a potki, where they met Amos Diggory and Cedric Diggory, who also plays a really big role in this series. He also goes to Hogwarts, and he's 17, and this will be his last year at Hogwarts. Ron all the way was talking about Crumb. He's really young, he said. He's just 18. Might even still be in school. Oh, Ron, that's rubbish, said Hermione. How could Crumb be in school? We all know that Hogwarts students have to go and pursue their careers when they're 18. Of course, though, she didn't know what was going to happen next, like later on in the book. So, they found the shoe. That's right, the shoe. That was the potki. Now, a potki is a magical thing which can make you kind of apparate to a different place. But that place, you can't just think of it and think, yeah, that's where I want to go, like you can with apparition. And for another thing, you don't have to pass a test to use one. A potki has destination A and destination B. It goes from A to B. You can't divert it to go from A to C because there is never any C. With apparition though, there's more than gazillion places. So even more than Z. So they kind of apparated using the potki to the Quidditch World Cup, where everyone was really excited. They then went to their campsite where Sir Roberts was the camp owner. He was a muggle. Yeah, a muggle. Why would they be using muggle campsites for the Quidditch World Cup? Are you telling me that muggles are also going to come to watch the Quidditch World Cup? Well, no. The thing is that the Quidditch World Cup is really in a deserted place. And there's a nearby campsite which is run by muggles. The wizards didn't have enough time to, build a campsite. So they had to use the muggles one instead. Which is why everyone had to dress up in muggle attire. Of course, for Harry and Hermione, that was really easy. But for the rest of the Weasleys who came, it wasn't. Because they're purebloods and they only do magical things. They literally had a clock in their house which shows where everyone is at every single minute. So they asked Mr. Roberts where their campsite would be, and he led them to it. They then had to build their own tents to reduce Muggle attention, and they were pretty small. There were two. One was slightly smaller than the other, because that one was for the girls, and there were only two girls here, which were Ginny and Hermione. Ginny was Ron's younger sister, who was now going to be going to her third year at Hogwarts. And the other tent, which was slightly bigger than a normal tent you would find, was for the boys. And let's see, there were a lot of boys there. If you count Percy, Bill, Charlie, Ron, Harry, and Arthur, there were 6 boys in a extra large tent. Well, it looked tiny on the outside, but on the inside it was ginormous. Harry didn't know if the girls' tent also had that feature, but he supposed so, because that tent would only be for sleeping. Anyways, back to their tent. It was literally decked out with a dining table, a living room, 2 large bedrooms with 2 beds each, and even a full-sized kitchen, bigger than the ones that the Weasleys had. Harry at that point started to wonder, if the Weasleys are so poor, no offense to them, how did they get such great tickets? And he didn't have to wait long for that question to be answered, because Ron said, I can't believe Bagman just gave away these tickets. That's so cool. So that's the answer. Bagman, Ludo Bagman, who was like a magical sports guy, who actually worked at the ministry as that job, was the one who gave 10 tickets away, which were all at the top. So they all got ready for the Quidditch Cup, and Harry even got some binoculars while he was staying at the Dursleys from Ron. Of course, Ron knew that this day would come, but at the time Harry got the binoculars, he didn't. Binoculars are like binoculars, just that they're magical, and you can literally speed things up as they're happening. Like if you look at a circus through the binoculars 500 feet away, you would literally see the circuit as you would 3 feet away. And another thing was that you could change the speed on it. So you could literally make the circus look like it's happening 5 times the speed that it's actually happening. So those were really cool, and Harry thought he could use them as a souvenir here, which was pretty cool, because the good thing was Ron gave Harry these binoculars, and even though Harry was really rich because of the money that his parents had left him, he didn't want to spend so much on binoculars, which were also selling as souvenirs at the Quidditch World Cup. Now, I think I said enough in this podcast. I'll continue telling you more about the Goblet of Fire in the next one. Hope you enjoyed, and make sure you listen to my other podcast, which you'll have as much fun listening to as you did on this one. Stay tuned and bye for now.